Apparently, and according to my wife, today is National Weatherperson's Day, February 5th. Now, I'll be honest, I have never heard of this. 2026 is my first year here about National Weatherperson's Day, but I did some digging into it, and it seems pretty official. It has its own Wikipedia page, it's recognized by the National Weather Service, and I thought I would mention it as it's a good call out here. Sometimes you hear about these days like, oh, today's like National, I don't know, like peanut butter and jelly day or something, and you're like, all right, how like real is this? They're just making these up at this point. But this one seems somewhat legitimate, and I think it's a good call out. I guess technically, I consider myself a weather person, but the recognition I think for a day like today should go to the National Weather Service and the government employed meteorologists who work around the clock, whose data we consume. Both Eric and I, our jobs that we do, disseminating so much of the information that they put together would be impossible without their work. They work night shifts as much as like 2 weeks in a row, if not longer. And putting together those watches, warnings, and the morning forecast. We show pictures like this every morning showing all those hazards which are being put together by the National Weather Service offices across the country with meteorologists working around the clock there. So they certainly deserve their due. There are a ton of meteorologists in the uniformed armed services who are mission critical in a lot of cases. If you read, historical accounts of, critical military battles and whatnot, you'll always find, more often than not, a critical weather component and meteorologists trying to put together what's going to happen for aviation. If you're a frequent flyer, I know United out of Chicago has a suite of meteorologists. I can only imagine Delta probably in Atlanta has them as well. They work around the clock as planes are landing and taking off, putting together those reports. I assume American probably has one out of Dallas. So there are meteorologists quite literally working all night trying to keep track of the weather for us. For these videos, Eric and I wake up a little bit early to put them together, but we're utilizing, data that's been accrued over the evenings for a long period of time. So it's a good day to call out them. It was named after a Boston meteorologist in the 18th century named John Jeffries, who pioneered a lot of early weather observations. He was a doctor, did a number of other things, and his birthday was on February 5th, quite a long time ago, so that is why that's celebrated today. I thought I'd show you what a National Weather Service office looks like. They have all these monitors and screens in there. Always have somebody working, like I said, overnight, putting together those forecasts, taking phone calls, and doing quite a bit of weather forecasting. This one's down in Miami, which is probably, I would imagine, a pretty good assignment, depending on what time of year it is. So, but I don't know, last week it was down to 35 degrees Fahrenheit, so I maybe can't say that every year this time of year. All right, just looking at the last 24 hours of precipitation, we had that front moving through the southeast yesterday. Quite a bit of rainfall recorded with that. I'm saying quite a bit just because we haven't seen a lot of rainfall here this winter in a number of these areas, besides recently here with these systems moving through. But, you get up near an inch plus of rainfall in these areas in the Carolinas, South Carolina, down through Georgia to the Gulf Coast. And it's worth pointing out, if you see this kind of like lighter shading here, that's actually some snowfall that got on the back side of this up into the Appalachians. There's cold enough on the back side of this system to bring some of that cold air down and some snow with it. This was valid about 6 a.m. I'm going to refresh this for 7 a.m. You can see here some values sneaking in here to the upper Midwest. We're actually seeing this little kind of clipper system embedded in the jet stream level flow here, bringing precipitation in the form of snow showers to the Midwest here this morning. That's going to continue tracking to the east, and then there might be, even here on the radar returns, we have another one of these systems coming in behind it, which is going to bring another shot of this kind of quick light to moderate snow. Might get a dusting, might get an inch out of it through kind of a quarter here into the mid-Atlantic. We'll take a look at those forecasts in just a second. This one's starting to cause perhaps some issues here between Green Bay and Appleton. It's kind of hard to pick out, what might be rush hour traffic at this point because we're getting kind of close to it. And I again apologize. This video is going to end up uploaded just a little bit later because I am in a hotel with somewhat poor internet. And you can see, that might be, I don't frequent between Green Bay, kind of that Tri-City area there, but that could be some of that snowfall getting a little bit heavier at times. Look at the current temperatures here this morning. We're cold in the Eastern Corn Belt, cold in New England. This is an area that has just been cold, for a long time, and the change is coming in the forecast. I'm going to spoil this because I'm going to talk about this very soon in the next few slides, but this kind of bitter Arctic chill that's been embedded over New England is finally going to break, I think, by mid-February, but negative 11 by Cincinnati, we are locked into that Arctic air still northeast. But you can see the change on the horizon a little bit. If you look over into the high plains here, Montana, up in the Canadian Prairie, Alberta, Saskatchewan, so you're starting to see that kind of Chinook effect where you get the kind of the warm air pushing in from the continental divide, kind of carving out this area of more mild temperatures here. in the midst of what is otherwise, a cold block of air here sitting across the central and eastern part of North America. That jet stream level flow, which Eric and I have been talking about, Andrew put together a number of great graphics yesterday, showcasing what's likely to be a pretty big pattern change here. We've had this dominant ridge situated across the western kind of quarter, western coastline. That's been keeping those stagnant air advisories across the west. If I jump back, right? Meteorologists issuing these overnight. You have the stagnant air advisories and like the one gray color that I don't know how to differentiate. This one looks a little bit dirtier, which makes sense. This is the dense fog advisories. That's a product of, just a lack of mixing the atmosphere around underneath that ridge, which is why we've seen that those advisories have been so persistent in the morning. But keep an eye on the Pacific. We have a nice shot of jet stream momentum here that's going to help kick out some of this pattern here. Remember, we were talking about that Greenland Ridge. We're going to start to kick that out. If we put this together in the ECMWF ensemble forecast, 500 millibar heights, well, we can already see this ridge, which is so often been kind of parked right over California and Washington, already here this morning. If I make a palette about 6 a.m., this is more of like a Boise, Salt Lake City, almost like a Pueblo ridge at this point. So it's already starting to get over near the continental divide. That's why we're seeing those warmer temperatures in the high plains. If I play this forecast forward, we have another little clipper swinging through the Midwest. I mentioned that one. This is on Friday, tomorrow. We have a cutoff near California. But already I've taken this out 48, 60 hours here, and that ridge is moving. Now it's stretching east. It's amplifying over the central plains and Midwest now. I take it through Saturday, Sunday. This cutoff low just kind of lingering down here near Cabo. And look at the jet stream starting to push in to the northwest. Pacific Northwest, likely to see quite a bit of rainfall, snow in the mountains here this weekend as that trough becomes more dominant Sunday and Monday. And the ridge that started this video here on Thursday as a Boise, Salt Lake City ridge is now a Des Moines, like Springfield, Missouri ridge. So that overspreads the Midwest, bringing warm temperatures relative to early February finally to the Midwest. Not quite New England, not quite the East Coast, because they're still under the backside of that trough there, but that change is coming. Now we have troughing situated over San Francisco. That's February 11th on Wednesday. Man, that could have been the Super Bowl Sunday. I think we're going to be okay now this weekend, but impressive to see that trough just parked right over California after that ridge had been there for so long throughout this forecast time period. You can still see the ridging over there in the eastern U.S. This is through the middle part of next week. Now we have flow, albeit a weak ridge, flow across the continental divide, likely seeing low pressure systems skate across the central and eastern U.S. next week, bringing precipitation, bringing a chance of storms for the south. I don't think they'll be severe, but it's something we'll have to keep an eye on, and potentially bring some snow to the upper Midwest, maybe even kind of like the northern central Midwest. I'm talking like I-80, I-90, that corridor there. So we'll look at that in just a second here. Now, I took this forecast all the way out. It's Thursday now. This is all the way past the 7-day point. But if I do take this forecast all the way out to mid-February, it only gets more amplified, this pattern change. You're anchoring a trough across the West Coast, very different. We've almost totally flipped the pattern around. Now, that ridge is an Atlanta ridge, or South Carolina, finally extending all the way up into the Hudson Bay, bringing warmth and mild temperatures and a break from this Arctic air to New England. If I take the forecast out just for fun at this point, still seeing the troughing across the west, still seeing this more zonal, progressive pattern, things moving through low pressure systems to talk about. So this is a big pattern change through mid-February. It very well may not play out exactly like we're seeing here from the ECMWF ensemble, the 15th through the 19th, but chances are better than not that the west is going to have better chances for snow, better chances for precipitation at lower elevation, and better chances for warmth and precipitation across the central and eastern U.S. You can see this just from the ECMWF operational run. Next 5 days, that warmth overspreading the high plains into the Canadian prairie. 5 to 10 days, you start getting out into later next week. You're talking warmth overspreading much of the eastern 2/3 of the continental U.S. and Canada. In fact, if you look at Canada, you're talking 90% of the populated areas there above average temperatures, save for Vancouver and portions of British Columbia. The warmth now overspreading New England as well. You see this cold, mild shadow here. That might just be the Great Lakes. Those are now at least, I think, close to 50% covered in ice. So they have all winter with that Arctic air parked over them. Those lakes will eventually freeze. And as they do that, they get less efficient at making lake effect snow, but still likely to see some clouds in this area. Those might be keeping temperatures down during the day. And then also just, it's ice. So it's kind of a source for cold air despite the warmth overspreading around it. We can see that actually just pull up those Great Lake ice coverage. This was valid as of, I think, yesterday. On Wednesday, the areas in gray are where that ice is frozen in. So you can see half of Lake Superior, that at least half of Lake Huron, all of Lake Erie because it's so shallow. Ontario relatively much deeper, and so much less of that is ice covered here. But also the open water, like even Lake Michigan, retains a lot of that water, not ice covered. But the water temperatures are well down. You're talking like 40 degrees Fahrenheit in some cases below. So it's not like earlier in fall or early winter when those water temperatures are like up in the 50s, where you'd see a map that looked like this would be more green, and you'd have that more fuel, right, for that lake effect snow. But in this case, we're starting to lose that as these go ice covered. All right, let's put this together in the precipitation forecast. Let's make this valid this morning, and then we'll do lunchtime. You can see that snow moving through the upper Midwest. Rainfall, some early showers in Florida here this morning. I may have glossed over this quickly, but you can see this line, that front, extending right through central Florida down near the lake. And that's going to be exiting further toward the southeast today. Let's get back to where I was. If we take it through this evening, there's that second shot that we mentioned. We might have seen that on radar up near the kind of Manitoba Lakes there. That swings through the upper Midwest tomorrow morning, probably pretty similar to what we saw this morning, albeit a little bit further to the south. Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia. Let's get into the Mid-Atlantic, even the Carolinas by Friday evening. Stretching anywhere from the Appalachians up through Pennsylvania into New York. Portions of Ontario, especially the populated areas, seeing some snow showers out of this. I don't think it's going to be particularly strong, but again, you might see dusting up to an inch. Some places might be able to scrape a little bit higher than that. So you get into the weekend, remember that's when that trough was starting to get its influence over the Pacific Northwest. So that's when the rainfall picks up really into Sunday for the Willamette Valley, the northern portion of it, the lower Willamette Valley kind of counterintuitively. Washington finally seeing some rainfall even into the Columbia Plateau here over towards Spokane. So a nice shot of rainfall all the way into Monday at this point before those snow showers start spreading over the elevated areas of Idaho, western Montana. Some snowfall there, and then we're just kind of watching and waiting next week, right? We wanted to get that flow across the Continental Divide to see if we can get some lows cutting off here, and we see that. One, cutoff low kind of scraping along the California coastline, the middle part of next week, all the way through Southern California, a light rainfall event possible with that. We have a low consolidating in the middle part of the country next week. This is Thursday morning. It's a week out at this point. It's not like I can lock in that I-80 north line as that kind of freezing line yet, but snow chances are increasing for the upper Midwest. I think for northern Iowa, certainly South Dakota, portions of Nebraska, certainly Minnesota and Wisconsin. Where this line sets up exactly is yet to be kind of detailed. I'm seeing that even move into Michigan. Rainfall south of there for the Midwest. Rainfall on a recently melted snowpack, so improving those soil moistures as well if we can get some of this into the ground and not running off into the rivers. By Friday, we have another low. Starting to scrape up kind of an Arklatex low, as we call them. Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas. These Arklatex lows can be reliable snowfall makers for the central Midwest. Now, this forecast is Friday, February 13th. It's currently Thursday, February 5th. I'm not going to put in a forecast for Indianapolis for 6 inches of snow right now, all the way at the end of next week, but it's something we have to keep an eye on, at least from the solution from the ECMWF. Now, you know what I'm going to do now. I'm going to compare that to the GFS. All right, let's take this through. There's that light shot of snow we talked about on Friday, moving from the Mid-Atlantic and New England. We get into Saturday and Sunday. Precipitation increases more significantly for the Pacific Northwest, even getting east of the Cascades here. Moves through Montana and Idaho with some snowfall there, Golden Triangle perhaps. And then watching and waiting, Tuesday, Wednesday, there's that scraping low. This one a bit stronger from the GFS, actually gets into the valley with some snow up in the Sierra Nevadas, all the way through Southern California. And Wednesday, Thursday, that low consolidating across Iowa, Minnesota, South Dakota, Northern Illinois, Wisconsin, but a little bit weaker, kind of fades, doesn't persist on Thursday. And then that second system, that looked more Arklatex in the ECMWF is more flattened out. It's more of a rainfall event for the southeast, quick shot of snow for New England. And I'll leave it there. I've taken it too far out. Now, I will mention all the way 10 plus days, we still have a low here. And then if I look at 240, 10 days from the ECMWF, we still have a low sneaking to the west. So remember, when we looked at the long range from the ECMWF ensemble, the jet stream configuration remained favorable even past the 14th for rainfall in the western U.S. You can imagine these lows moving west to east over the western U.S. through that forecast if I extended it even further out. Okay, if we look at the ECMWF snowfall forecast, this takes us all the way out through Saturday, February 14th. You can see that heavier snow across South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, pushing through Ontario, up into Quebec as well, along the St. Lawrence, more so over New England. To the south of that, this low is much more in question. I think that's going to potentially scrape through the central. We saw from the GFS it was flatter. There's less backside snow with it. And I think this corridor here across the upper Midwest is more of the focus next week, like Thursday, where we might see that snowfall Wednesday and Thursday. What we can also see out of this, unfortunately, if we focus on the western U.S., we do see some snow. Now remember, the GFS was a little bit more bullish on Sierra Nevada snow, but given that we've flipped more favorable for the west, I would like to see a bit healthier snow accumulations over the next 10 days for the western U.S. We're still getting some. I'm not going to complain about it, but I want more. I'd want more snow because a lot of these areas are so below average. Now, the good news is the pattern stays favorable, I think, at least for another week past the 10-day forecast here. So we'll have another chance, to improve the snowpack here. And that might mean another chance for these lows to go ripping across the eastern U.S. with more precipitation. We'll look at that in a second. If we compare that to the GFS, again, remember the GFS is going to accumulate more of that like sleet and freezing rain and paint it as snowfall. So, I would discount what we're seeing here near Omaha, up near a foot. I mean, I can't rule it out, but I'd be surprised by that. Still kind of seeing that same corridor across Wisconsin, Minnesota, South Dakota, northern Iowa for expected precipitation. And you can see the GFS does not have that kind of Midwest snow track that the ECMWF did. Another way we can look at that kind of 10-day and beyond, I went out and looked at the precipitation probabilities from the ECMWF ensemble. So which areas over the next 10 days are likely to receive at least a half inch of rainfall. Pacific Northwest, no question, especially over toward the northern Rockies, but even getting into like California. Look at the Central Valley, coastal California. You're getting up near like 40 to 50% over the next 10 days to at least get a half inch of rain, which would be substantial for some of those areas here. You're looking like east of Dallas-Fort Worth on a line all the way up to like Syracuse, up into Manitoba and Ontario, above 50% or around that territory. And then you get into like the eastern Midwest, let's call this like the Ohio River Valley. You're talking pretty good chances of some heavier rainfall over the next week or two. If I take this forecast further out, you see a lot of these areas fill in right in that corridor here. So really good chance at measurable rainfall getting into the soil here across portions of the central and eastern U.S., even California and the west. Look at that, fills in significantly now if I take that forecast all the way out till the 19th. We can see that by looking at the panels of the precipitation anomalies. So here's the CPC on the left, 8 to 14 days, ECMWF ensemble, the AFS and the GFS there. Better precipitation chances for the Midwest, the Ohio River Valley, the eastern kind of continental U.S., but also the west. California from the AFS goes gangbusters. That's an operational run. But the broader flow is still favorable for the western U.S. There are these pockets in here of drier than average, but they're variable. Some of these areas are going to be above, some below. I think the broader story here is we're improving the snowpack. We're improving the rainfall situation across two areas of the country here through the middle to latter part of February at this point. And if I take this jet stream forecast from the ECMWF ensemble, my colleague Andrew Pritchard did a great job kind of writing up this yesterday. If we go out to the Wednesday, February 18th, you got a jet ripping through Memphis, right through like Paducah, a large long wave trough kind of centered over Salt Lake City. This is a pattern for rain across the eastern U.S., potentially even severe storms to the southeast. Kind of early to be talking about that, but now this is a long-range forecast I just mentioned. We're all the way out to February 18th at this point, but this is a significant pattern change that we have to watch closely. So I want to see how much rain we're going to get out of this, and potentially some backside snow as well across the upper Midwest, maybe even severe storms to the southeast. We kind of already talked about temperatures. I will, if we look all the way out, I'm looking at the rightmost panel here. That's the 10 to 15 day temp anomalies, and you can see that warmth all the way up into Canada, across the eastern U.S., across New England, across the central U.S. The west now going back cold, and we've totally flipped that pattern around in the 10 to 15 day forecast. All right, I do want to point out something Eric mentioned yesterday, that fading La Nina. We've talked about that lack of upwelling potential for cold water here. This is, La Nina really looking meager at this point in early February. And I went back through the analogs. I brought up 2018 a few times this year. In early January, the sea surface temperatures between 2026 and 2018 look quite similar. And we talked about the implications of that. Since then, we've seen such a rapid fading of La Nina, and that didn't occur quite to the same extent in 2018, but more so in 2014. And now if I compare February 3rd from this year with that weak La Nina, the warmth across the North Pacific, to 2014, I'm seeing more similarities now with 14 in February than I saw with 18, at least with respect to where we're at in 2026. This is a very weak, meager La Nina, almost to the same level that the current one is. You could maybe argue the 14 one is a little bit stronger. You have that warmth across the North Pacific, that kind of warm blob here, as they called it, on the Northeast Pacific in 2014. And this warm blob, if it lasts through the growing season, is your recipe for a ton of storms and relatively favorable for temperatures for the at least central part of the growing region in North America. And that was the case in 2014, bumper crop year. I think it's still our highest positive delta above trend. It still has that mark at least since 2014. And to think that here in 2026, at least our best comparison in February that I can find over the last 20 years might be 2014. I mean, I'm not saying that's exactly the year that's going to play out. We have to watch the Northeast Pacific. You'll hear that from Eric more than anybody else. But the fact that these two look similar now, I mean, it's worth keeping an eye on. March through May of 2014, that same story we've been talking about, this potential dryness spreading from the southern plains up into the central plains, even the Midwest. But by the time you go over to summer 14, let's bring up those precipitation departures from that year, wet across a wide area of the growing region, drought concern across the southeast potentially. Again, these years are like fingerprints. There's no one is the same, but at least right now the similarities are worth pointing out. We have to watch those sea surface temperatures in the Northeast Pacific. We do have the latest ECMWF forecast out. Let's see if we can make that bigger. No, that's about as big as it gets. We see that still the ECMWF warming up those ocean temperatures in the central and eastern Pacific. That's a clear El Nino signal developing by the middle of summer, if not the latter part of summer. But critically in the Northeast Pacific, staying warm. And so if I were to show you the latest, finally we have the summer forecast from the ECMWF seasonal, which is June, July, all the way out to August. It feels silly to look that far out, frankly, with seasonal forecasts. We tell you that all the time. But putting these two together, rapidly warming up into an El Nino, staying warm in the Northeast, it's not a surprise then if I jump over and show you June, July, August. From that latest, this came out today, from the ECMWF seasonal, wetter across a wide area of the growing regions. Again, we can't put this in Sharpie. Got to see where those ocean temperatures go. There's no rule saying it has to follow 2014 because it looks similar now, right? We said that about 2018, but they're starting to diverge a little bit on the rate of decrease in that La Nina. It's worth mentioning, I'll take this back to the March, April, May forecast. It's actually wet across kind of a similar area. We were worried about that central and southern plains droughts, and some of the analogs, 2018 included, I believe 09 was in that bin as well. Not seeing that as much from the latest ECMWF seasonal. Still kind of seeing it maybe over in the western plains, but not as big of a signal there. We'll say if I take this further out, May, June, trying to see that southeast, there's a little bit of a dry signal there. I'd have to keep an eye on that just because that was also in a few of those analogs as well. But now I wouldn't say a huge change in the seasonal update, still kind of sticking with the script that we've seen in some of these wetter analog years. But like I said, a lot can change. No analogs are the same, and these forecasts are not known for their accuracy, to say the least. I'll leave it there today. Eric will talk with you all tomorrow on Friday. As for today, thanks for watching.